Yes, hello and welcome to a special edition of Loose Ends, coming this week from the historic BBC Radio Theatre Broadcasting House in London, in front of a special historic Loose Ends audience. Yes, and what an extraordinary week it's been for financial news. A major British international bank admits that it made fortunes of money fiddling interest rates. Quite a shock. I mean, when did the last time you heard a major British international bank making any money at all? Also this week, a hoard of ancient gold coins worth millions of pounds was discovered hidden away in Jersey. And the shock here was it apparently had nothing to do with Jimmy Carr. But we have something of a literary loose ends today. We could call it the Book Club, if that title weren't already taken. Jenny Eclair is an ebullient, sometimes outrageous stand-up comedian, but she's here to celebrate the publication of her third novel, Life, Death and Vanilla Slices. The historian David Starkey can also be outrageous, though I don't think he calls himself a comedian. He's here to talk about his latest series for Channel 4, but he too is a prolific author of something like 20 works, mostly of non-fiction. And we have one of Radio 4's big hitters, the Today programme's star interviewer, Jim Naughtie. He's a literary figure as well. He presents the book club every month. In fact, there's one going up tomorrow, and he's in charge of Radio 4's Landmark series, celebrating 60 new Elizabethans who've come to the fore during the Queen's 60 years on the throne. In an exciting musical lineup, we have performers originally from as far away as Senegal and Nottingham. That's Baba Mal and Natalie Duncan. And the noted author Arthur Smith has brought a poet to the party. Who have you brought?
Simon Armitage, poet roue, staggered the length of the Pennine Way, doing some gigs to pay his way. He'll tell me all about this today.
Right. So, just demonstrating your poetic ability as well there. Well, now, let's start with Jim Naughtie. He's been one of the... Should I call you Jim Naughtie or James Naughtie?
Oh, I think it's a Saturday evening, isn't it?
All right. OK. Mr. Naughtie, then. And he's been one of the main presenter of Radio 4's flagship Today programme since 1994, and a survey was apparently voted the best voice to wake up to in the morning.
I'm afraid that was a survey done by Tropicana Orange Juice. I mean, I'm not complaining.
Was that based on your radio work or on your personal life?
Well, right, I think it's waking everyone up in the morning and not sending them back to sleep.
OK. Now, I've mentioned you present a number of other programmes, but in particular, Radio 4's epic project to profile 60 of the most prominent Elizabethans, obviously in celebration of the Queen's Diamond Jubilee. So how were they selected? How did you decide who was going to get on the list?
Well, it wasn't me, which is the first thing, but a panel of people...
You're getting your excuses in early, then.
Well, indeed. Very distinguished characters, really. We're trying to catch something of, you know, the big hitters who've made news, done great things in science, in the arts, in politics and public life, but also to catch people who simply tell us something about the kind of age we've lived in and have left some footprints in the sand, which maybe didn't lead to a Nobel Prize, but nonetheless have done something strange or characteristic. And Barbara Windsor is in there, for example.
Yes,
now,
that's it.
You see, I mean, you know, she was never in any danger of winning a Nobel Prize, nor indeed an Oscar, I mean, one might say. But all those carry-on films, EastEnders, all the rest of it, there is a story you can tell about our time through her, using her as a kind of large upside-down prism, if I can put it
so
like
I think
that.
Max...
Do you know the most interesting thing about her, which I discovered? She's got size 1.5 feet.
All right.
Hence the upside-down pyramid reference.
Yeah. So you do a lot of research on these. Did you apply... Did you go measuring everybody's body for this program?
No, some bodies are more interesting to measure than others,
but you've got Barbara Windsor and there, Goldie, Enoch... You've got Enoch Powell rather than Edward Heath, for example. That seems rather odd.
Well, it seems to me you can't tell the story. I'm delighted Enoch Powell's there. I don't think you can tell the story of the last 60 years without his electric presence. But again, you see, I just wrote the one about Enoch Powell the other day. I mean, it won't be broadcast till later, but in that one, we know the story of the speech that's called the Rivers of Blood speech, and we know what he did in Europe and so on. But what you're also trying to catch is something about his character, and he did one interview late in life where someone said to him, why don't you listen to much music now, because you were very keen on music when you were a young man, and indeed played the clarinet in a quite a talented way when he was a schoolboy. Got to Cambridge, decided it was interfering with his work, put it in its case, closed the lid, and never touched it again. Incredible kind of ardent control, which you may think is admirable or scary or a bit of both.
Well, just lazy.
Well, yes. But somebody said to him late in life...
What did he play with his clarinet? Was it Dixieland Jazz?
Well, there was a bit of that, funnily enough.
Yeah.
But when someone said to him late in life, why don't you listen to as much music as you once did? And he said, I never think it is a good idea to awaken longings in yourself which cannot be fulfilled.
Oh, well,
now, isn't that... But you
yes,
see, that kind of remark, I think, gets you into the character of someone that takes you, behind the historical figure of our time who did various things, got involved in various controversial matters. And so what the series is trying to do is...
Well, you might just interrupt,
Yeah, sure.
because the... you know what it's like. You know what it's like when you've got somebody giving a long answer.
I'll take it as a joke, rather a contrived one. But
No, not at all. But that's all very well for looking at the character of Enoch Powell, but it doesn't really explain why he's in there. I mean, I used Edward Heath as a contrast because he took Britain into Europe.
Well,
had quite an up-and-down premiership, but he was Prime Minister.
Heath is a walk-on part. Look, in the 60 people, we've got 5 politicians. Blair, Thatcher, Powell, Roy Jenkins and Alex Salmond. And now you could equally have, Ted Heath, Tony Benn,
yes,
Harold Wilson. But those 5 seem to me, or even a woman...
Well, Margaret Thatcher wasn't a woman,
Debatable.
Last time I checked.
Well, you've got Paul Foot, but not Michael Foot. So a journalist
Paul Foot's a very interesting one because he's the classic dissenter, the great political agitator who had nothing to do with politics, if you know what I mean, in terms of normal politics. Of course, he's also part of the Private Eye story. So it's people through whom... You see, Barbara Windsor, writing about Barbara Windsor, which I've done, I come back to her inevitably. You can write about Sid James, you can write about all sorts of people, you see. Tony Hancock we've done.
Yes.
He's just been on, in fact. And Hancock's wonderful because you can talk about how comedy was changing as between the 50s and 60s, and then how, just as it all changed, satire came in and said, Hancock couldn't face it. I mean, the decline was immense, it was fast, and of course he ended up taking his own life terribly sadly. Yeah. But in the 50s and 60s, as I said in the programme, 23 railway cuttings East Cheam was the epicentre of the little man's struggle against the world.
Sure, anyway, so this
Can
is...
I just ask you one thing about Roy Jenkins?
Yes.
What size feet did he have?
I'm more interested in the hat size.
The hat size was fairly large.
Huge.
Now, look,
And current capacity.
You've been interviewing people in the relatively early morning for, decades now.
Yeah.
So what's your assessment of how things stand? It's a lot of politics you do. Are politicians getting better, worse, harder to interview?
Well, I think there's a paradox here. They think they're getting better. They learn all the tricks. They're taught all the tricks. They're given pieces of paper that are alleged to teach them all the tricks. What they don't realise, many of them, is that it doesn't work. And in fact, it would be much better if they forgot about all the coaching and all the tricks and said, I've changed my mind. Or, I should have said that the first time, I'm terribly sorry. And instead, they go into all these contorted sort of business-speak explanations, which people can see through. Because as political figures in all parties have learned these sort of communication techniques, as they're told they are, the audience has actually learned them as well, and knows perfectly well what it is, which is a sort of carapace of, candy floss.
I suppose I have to put one question to you. It's a difficult question to put to you because it involves a criticism. Some people say sometimes your questions go on too long. Now, I just want to ask you because some people say they're too long. Others, of course, say it's not too long. And I understand why, in the context of a complicated argument, you want to be able to put all sides of it so that the interlocutor can deal with the points in one go.
Do you know the answer?
Sometimes occupy too much of the programme before you actually get to the answer.
The listener needs to hear the blush.
I'll give you the
on
answer.
James's cheeks, it throbs.
I'll give you the answer. Yes.
And do you sometimes have arguments with Mr. Humphreys as who's to get the Prime Minister or the big interview of the day? How is that decided? Who gets the one of the day?
He is a complete puppy dog. If you believe that, you'll believe anything.
But
no, it's fine. There's enough to go
Is there
around.
a way of sort of sorting it out? Now, of course, you had a memorable moment with when things went a little awry. When he's now a bit more prominent, but Jeremy Hunt, you managed to mispronounce his name. I'm going to avoid any problem by just calling him the Culture Secretary.
Well,
now, that's live broadcasting in a serious programme. That's when things do go wrong.
It is, but everybody knew that it was one of those things that, well, it shouldn't happen, but it does, and nobody took political offence. In fact, quite a funny story immediately afterwards. I obviously wrote him a letter that morning to say...
Using your spell checker.
Well, yeah. handwritten. And just explain, you know, just saying, look, what can I say? But at some length. And I thought
Did you get a one-word reply?
Well, I must... Actually, I got a text. But I thought I'll deliver this myself. So, just to make sure it gets there. So I went to the department and I said, look, I've got a very important letter here, which really does need to get to the recipient immediately. And the girl behind the desk at the Department of Culture, Media and Sport said, oh, yes, that's fine. Who's it for? And I said, it's for Jeremy Hunt. And she said, who's he? I said, I think you'll find he's the Secretary of State.
Yes. Well, we all know who he is now, because he's become slightly more famous at subsequent events. Anyway, thank you very much, Jim Naughtie. You can hear more New Elizabethans Monday to Friday at 12:45. You've bitten into You and Yours. You've taken a quarter hour for You and Yours. I don't know if that deserves blame or praise, but there it is, right up to the beginning of September. Now, time for some music now from Natalie Duncan. She's 23 years old, half Jamaican, half Greek, from Nottingham. She's self-taught pianist, homegrown soul girl. Natalie releases her debut album, Devil in Me, next month. Delighted she's here to perform. Lonely Child, she's got Hattie, white-haired backing vocals, Tom Varrell on guitar, Dan Galino on bass, and Glyn Rhys-Daniels on drums. Natalie Duncan. Thank you very much. Well done. Well done, Natalie Duncan and band. Natalie Duncan plays Shepherd's Bush Empire on the 12th of July and Cargo in London on the 7th of August. Now, for quite a while, Jenny Eclair has cut a dash in the worlds of comedy, acting, broadcasting and writing. She was the first female winner of the Perrier Award in Edinburgh. She's been a grumpy old woman, a loose woman, and appeared on all sorts of other programmes and stages. Nowadays, she writes books as well. She's just published her third novel, Life, Death and Vanilla Slices, which is about the life of Anne Armitage, her husband and sons in London, and Jean Collins, her mother, in a coma in a Blackpool hospital.
She's no trouble.
So we hear we're sort of taken into the world of the woman in London, and her mother in a coma. She is also, as it were, reflecting on life within her sort of almost vegetative state.
Yeah, vegetative, but can remember everything.
Yes,
fortunately.
yes. Well, that's quite a good device.
Yes, I know, and it was wonderful actually. She kind of wrote herself, despite the fact she can do nothing.
Yeah.
She can remember everything, and it's basically about mothers and daughters. It's about how daughters reinvent themselves and they sort of disappear from their mothers' lives and become somebody else elsewhere, which I think a lot of us do. But we all get drawn home. We all have to go home, and I think it's quite. A lot of it is to do with being a middle-aged woman, because a lot of us are at that point in our lives where our parents are getting frail and you have to go home. And as with a lot of books, you know, there are secrets. There are secrets tucked
which are
down
gradually
the back
revealed.
Of the sofa. Yeah, some of them are revealed, but some of them aren't.
Yes. Would it be fair to say that it starts off as a funny book? There's lots of jokes.
Yes.
Albeit of sort of
then it goes really
waspish
horrible.
jokes, but then it gets more and more serious as you go. Did you sort of change your mind in the middle of writing the book and decide, oh, I can't be bothered with so many jokes, I want to go into deeper issues here?
No, I didn't. I think I quite like sort of pulling people in one direction, and then I think that by nature I'm emotionally manipulative.
Yes.
And the best review I've had so far for this book was this morning when my daughter's living with me at the moment. She's 23, and I heard this noise from upstairs, and it was just... I thought, oh, what's happened now? And she said, your book has broken me. And I thought, yes, yes. And she's got a degree from Oxford in English. She knows her stuff. So,
well, it's a good job she's a daughter, because you're pretty harsh on the sons of this woman. I mean, you represent the youth of today as pretty feckless, foul-mouthed, lazy, don't pay attention to their mother, public school boys, they're interested in sex, drugs and misbehaving.
Yeah, they're great fun. But I'm also very spiteful to them. What's great about writing a book is that you set these people up for falls, and it's a bit like being an adult with a doll's house. So, because for me, having the houses is very important. I steal houses first. And in the past, I've burnt houses down. I burnt down a house down Camberwell Grove once. Where
You're talking about in your fiction, rather?
Yeah, fiction. But, you know, the woman who actually lived in the real house, her son came up to me and said, thanks to your book, my mother bought a smoke alarm.
Yes.
So I've done good in my life.
The power of literature.
Yes.
Well, I was fearful for the house in this, because you set up the sort of notion of the sons on their own in the house and people's phones are getting lost. And you think, oh, a big... you know, real trashing of this house, and it doesn't happen. You go off to these...
Thank you, Clive.
Well, it's the only bit of plot I'm going to read, because instead you go into these more serious memories of things happening in St Anne's and Blackpool, which is the area you come from.
It is the area I come from. As I say, knowing the place where things are set is very important. I do envy, and I have huge admiration for people that can write stuff set in Victorian times, in houses they've never even been to. But I have to know the walls and the furniture, and I have to sort of, as I say, it's that doll's house thing. I have to be able to move the people around.
Your run with loose women is coming to an end, is that right?
My chubby little knees will no longer be required under that particular desk.
I couldn't quite work out from the thing that was being said there whether you were leaving off in a huff, or you'd come to the end of a contract, or they'd sacked you, or what actually happened there?
Well, this is it's quite a long story.
Okay.
And it did. I think I might have blotted my copybook by an incident.
Oh, right.
That I don't know legally whether we can go into.
Yes, we can.
Did you tell it very slowly? Just start at the beginning, and we'll all
Okay, shall I tell you?
Yes.
Okay.
No,
I'll tell you.
We've got Jim Naughtie here, the Today programme.
It will.
The Today programme never has any problems with having things being said, bringing down the resignation of the top men of the BBC or anything like that. Sorry, Jenny.
Go for it.
Yeah. Okay. Down the ITV corridors, there are pictures of the big stars. I was bored. I had a pen on me.
Well done, Jenny.
Oh, it's not...
How old am I?
Yeah. It's not a Hitler moustache, is it?
It was a pubic hair, which I drew coming out of the dress of a certain female star, and then I did a ball bag. out of the trousers of another TV star.
I can see why you didn't want to tell this story, but not just quite legal reasons. It's more taste reasons, I think.
Serious on Channel 5.
Is there a second chapter? Or is that it?
All right, let's give us something else to end on. Are you going...
You won't put that in, will you?
Oh, who knows? Now, the... What a less word
OK,
to use.
do you want to give me another question to finish it off?
Is it right you're going on... You're in the middle of a canal trip, taking you to Edinburgh?
No, I launched a canal boat yesterday, which is going out to Edinburgh, which involves...
So you're not going on the trip?
No, I'm not putting myself on
I thought the idea is you're a bunch of
Who
comedians...
do you think I am, the Queen?
I thought you were going to go on the canal and stop off and do gigs along the way.
Some comics will be doing that. I will
You can't be bothered to do that.
I'm writing a
You're
new
too grand
stand-up
for that.
show.
OK. Oh, well, thank you very much for joining us on a loose programme, anyway. Jenny Eclair.
My pleasure.
Well, I don't think I'd ever say this, but to raise the tone, over to Arthur Smith.
Simon Armitage is a poet, novelist, playwright and part-time northerner. He is, well, full-time northerner, really. He's won more prizes than Clive Anderson lost cases when he was a barrister. And 2 summers ago, Simon dreamed up and executed a really rather marvellous scheme. Perhaps you can tell us what it was, Simon.
I decided to walk the Pennine Way, the village where I was born and brought up, a village called Marsden in West Yorkshire. The Pennine Way runs through there, so it was always part of my psychology when I was a kid. But I decided to do it, the Pennine Way, the wrong way round. So I started up in Scotland, because that way I would always be walking home and walking into the weather and with the map upside down all the time. And I also decided to do it as an old-fashioned troubadour. So instead of taking any money with me, I just gave readings every night in pubs, village halls, schools, in somebody's front.
And just took a collection?
Yeah, and I just said to people, put into this... no, actually, I handed a sock round, a clean one at the beginning. I said, just put into this sock what you think I'm worth, which wasn't always money, I have to say. And I suppose I was trying to... I was testing my reputation as a poet and maybe testing poetry's reputation as well, you know, as to whether I could earn a crust from
And
A
also
to B.
testing your own fortitude in the walking. Because it's a pretty tough walk. I can't resist saying I've done it myself, the Pennine Way. It's a pretty hard, tough landscape.
If you start in Scotland and go into Yorkshire, it's downhill all the way.
Yeah, well, I think Simon discovered this was not the case.
Yeah, actually, the day before I set off, somebody sent me an email pointing out that if you're walking towards the equator from the north, you're actually walking uphill because the Earth bulges in that direction. So thank you very much for letting me know.
Were you reading your own work, Simon, in these pubs and
I
lay-bys?
hope so, otherwise it'd be cheating.
But were you doing some sort of poetry out of the rattle bag, as it were?
No, I was reading my own stuff. You know, that was part of the idea, really. And sometimes I was trying to write during the day and read the poems at night.
You found it hard to write, I think,
I couldn't do it. I mean, as you say, Arthur, it's a tough walk. It's not one of these new boutique walks where there's a fancy hotel at the end of each leg. It's an assault course, really.
Yeah, it's not like the South Downs Way. Yeah.
And... So I think whatever part of my brain I needed for navigation was the same part of my brain I must use for writing. So there were very few poems composed along the route.
Yeah, actually, when you started, there were some odd incidents along... I mean, mostly it was, in some sense, predictable, but Raoul Moat was on the loose not far away when you started.
Yeah, that was a strange shadow over the first few days. I was actually told by a Pennine Ranger not to go up there on one day because they'd been told to work in pairs. And this was up in the Cheviots, and you'd look down some of the valleys and you could see... marksmen, sniffer dogs, police vans, and I was in a place, Alwynton, one night, which was just upstream from where he was actually, you know, tracked down, and this is all cheery stuff, isn't it?
Are you in danger of being arrested? Because, I mean, you say, oh, you look as a suspect. Oh, no, I'm a poet who's going in another pub. Sounds like a little bit of a lame excuse.
What greater alibi? I found that the word poet opens a lot of doors. I mean, people sort of either glaze over or just look a bit puzzled and say, yeah, go on your way. It's fine.
you stayed with a lot of people. You kind of put a sort of help call out on the internet and whatnot, and you stayed with people who'd just written in, and people you didn't know, and you walked with people you'd never met before.
Yeah.
That must have made it harder in some senses.
Well, there was always that odd moment at the end of every day, about sort of 4 o'clock, when I'd be getting into a strange town, and I'd end up in a strange house with a stranger, back bedroom, not quite sure how to use their plumbing, what the etiquette for the house was, whose towel I should use, all that stuff. But I suppose they were taking a bit of a chance on me as well. But yeah, I'd put a note on my website saying I'm going to be in this village or town on a particular day, and if you'll put me up for the night and organise a reading, then I will come and do that for free.
But
and
did
can you point me in the right direction the next
when
day?
I'm rambling, the last thing I want would be to, be attached to 10 other people I'd never met before. I mean, do you not find that part of the pleasure of walking is a degree of solitude and a kind of connection with the landscape?
I think before I went, I was anticipating some of that, Wordsworthian solitude. But actually, every day, a little community formed and walked with me. And I think the books turned out to be a book about other people and their lives. There was one morning in Garrigal, I think, when I woke up about 7 o'clock, and people at the pub the night before had all been promising and threatening to walk with me, and I thought, this is just the beer talking, and I opened the curtains and there were about 15 people stood there, and I felt like it was like that moment in Monty Python. I felt like saying, he's not the Messiah, he's a very naughty boy.
The Pennine Way itself it's the sort of daddy of all long-distance walks in Britain, isn't it? And it even has a kind of political overtone to it.
Yeah, I think there's still a political aspect to walking up on those moors. I was shocked to find out every single day that people owned these places. It seems to me that the moors are, you can't own them, really. But they're owned and they're managed mainly for the shooting of birds. And I think it still is, as it was, at the time of the mass trespass up on the Pennine Way.
Which was in, 1927 or something?
I can't remember the exact date, but it was in Derbyshire, and I think it was in the 30s, actually, Arthur. And,
it was 31, actually, isn't it? Around about there. It's this kind of...
All right.
No, that's all right.
Teacher's pet.
It's probably wrong.
Any advances on 1931, Jenny?
It was April.
April, yeah.
Wednesday afternoon.
Actually,
it was a Sunday.
You notice that we haven't asked the historian here.
It's a bit after his time.
But that was the right to roam, and that was a kind of political act there, wasn't it? You call it the Route 66, and in some sense you sort of hint that you're Odysseus coming home.
Well, I sort of draw on some of those models for travel literature, the Odyssey being one of the great travel books of all time, and also I draw on Sir Gawain and the Green Knight and his travels through Britain, not knowing at all where he was going at that time. So yeah, I invoke those books and those characters from the past.
Did you manage to break even? Because you kind of took your money, which obviously you declared to the taxman, but some nights you made like 25 quid, and some nights a lot more. Did you actually kind of pay for the walk?
Well, I do an audit at the end of the book, and I tot it all up, how much I'd taken and how much I'd spent on, various waterproofing pieces of clothing and, beds for the night when I couldn't get anywhere to stay. And then I divided it by the actual hours I'd spent on the whole thing, and it turned out I earned just more than the minimum wage.
Well, there you go.
But I had a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah. Well, and may I say, I had a lot of fun reading the book Walking Home by Simon Armitage. You're also, just give a quick plug for this Poetry Parnassus thing you're doing.
Yeah, this is an event that's going on at the moment down at the South Bank Centre, Poetry Parnassus. We've invited a poet from every Olympic country to come and give readings and discussions and debate and argument, and so they're all there at the moment. We've had a little Olympic village built, so it's chaos. It's chaos, but it's poetic chaos.
Yeah. Well, okay. Simon Armitage, thank you very much. I hope you'll be walking home to Huddersfield afterwards.
Yes. Excellent. Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Arthur, and Simon Armitage off with his money to walk the Jersey Way. Time for more music now. I'm delighted to welcome the celebrated Senegalese singer and human rights campaigner, Baba Mal. He's in the UK to create Africa Utopia, a month-long festival at the South Bank which celebrates Africa's cultural contribution to the world. It begins on Tuesday, runs till the 24th of July, with Baba performing on the first night with his band. He's joined on stage today by Jim Palmer and Mamadou Sarr on percussion, to perform Tindo, Baba Mal.
noinde sudumada tapitoda jonkalemada kodum woni faroma na 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 na. Penda nenam tinno der sodumada tepito da jom kalemada kodum woni faroma jamanu rewbe kame sukabe yeto narara pende nenam tinno pende nenam tinno inder sudumada topito da jom kalemada kodum woni faroma na 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 na. Jajiyo masamba jaji no on masamba ye mi jam koy rutiba Africa sayinama di jam na lay bendam Africa ye Africa ye Africa na oh ho ho Africa ye Africa jamachoto ni sana Africa ye Africa ye Africa ye Africa no masamba Africa
Well done. Thank you very much for joining us here on Lucette. Baba Mal can also be seen on the Africa stage at the River Music Festival on Saturday the 21st of July. Dr. David Starkey is a well-known and sometimes controversial figure, seeming to relish his sobriquet, the rudest man in Britain. For about 30 years he pursued an academic career in Cambridge and then London, but in recent years he's explored his love of history in television series about Henry VIII, the Tudors and other aspects of British history. His latest series for Channel 4, where he's a sort of historian in residence, he looks at the two Churchills, Winston Churchill and his ancestor, another great warrior, the Duke of Marlborough. So it's a great connection you put together, but of course Churchill himself had already put the connection together and had written a history of his ancestor, John Churchill, as he started off life as.
Yeah, in fact, the way the series worked, it was interesting listening to what Jenny was saying about how a book changes. Occasionally, you are interesting.
Now, hang on, I was going for a world record for you to do an interview without being rude to anybody, and I think you've already slipped up there.
I've already broken it.
You've been
I
muttering.
take it as a compliment.
The series shifted as we started making it. We thought it was going to be roughly an equal balance between Winston in the 20th century and John Churchill in the 17th. And then we discovered the fact that although John Churchill is undoubtedly our greatest general, I mean, wipes the floor with anybody else, he breaks the power of France single-handedly, he was too nice, unlike me. He was boring.
Yes,
unlike me.
You don't suffer from being too nice, I think. That is
or indeed too boring. So
we'll leave that one open.
What we did was to shift the weight to something else, which is how I got really interested in it, which is Churchill as a historian and how Churchill the historian transforms Churchill the politician. In other words, when Jim was talking about why our current politicians are so awful, there are two answers. They're very young, which is why you and Paxman and so on can make mincemeat of them, because they've got absolutely no experience, they've got no inherited gifts at all, it seems to, or educationally developed gifts at all. Churchill isn't like that, but they've never seriously studied history. Whereas the thing that makes Churchill great is the fact that he's a great historian. Whilst everybody else in the 1930s is doing themselves silly over pacifism, quite understandably because of the reaction to the First World War, Churchill is writing, researching, thinking about war. In other words, the book is the preparation for his future as war leader and prime minister.
Out, and you're slightly unkind to modern politics. You say none of them could write a book like work of history like this. But for example, William Hague's written a history of Pitt the Younger and William Wilberforce. Jenkins we've mentioned.
Absolutely, there's one enormous contrast though. William Hague has achieved nothing as a politician.
Well, yeah, but Churchill's reputation depends upon his achievements as a war leader, and he didn't become prime minister until he was in his 60s. So William Hague's got loads of time. He's just got to read a few books about war in Afghanistan and Iraq, and he'll be leading our great war effort, as no doubt will be pursuing.
Alas, I think that's very unlikely. His career is already seriously over. There's no chance. Clive, the thing that really matters about Churchill is that we normally think of, as you yourself were describing, Churchill is a dud politician, a brilliant one but a dud one, for so much of his career. We think of the 30s when he loses office in 1929, he doesn't get it back until he's Prime Minister. We think of this as the wilderness years, the years when, Churchill vegetates. They're not. They're the transformative years. And this is one of the great problems with modern politics. When you fail, as Churchill had done in his earlier career, you don't get that second chance. With Churchill, circumstances give him that second chance, and he comes back to greatness, having gone out really as a failure. It's very, very interesting.
Can I just introduce a question to this programme? But the interesting thing, because I've teased you before about the fact that you, along with all history teachers, seem to concentrate entirely on the Tudor period and the Romans, maybe a bit of the Second World War. But this programme deals a lot with this campaign. With John Churchill leading against Louis XIV. Why is that period of our history not entirely ignored, but it's just not in the public mind at all?
It's extraordinary. As I say, part of the reason is that Churchill himself, John, is not a wildly interesting character, though his wife, Sarah, is. Jenny, you would love her. She was fantastic.
His sister sounds like a bit of a girl as well.
She's indeed. She finds herself receiving a proposal of marriage long after her husband is dead from the grandest, richest duke in the kingdom, the Duke of Somerset, and she replies in this wonderful phrase, were I young and fair as I once was.
What's she trying to say, David?
Old and withered as I now am.
David, be careful.
Yeah, I can do it. The hand that once belonged to John Churchill, Duke of Marlborough, would never be yours. I mean, there's the rhetoric, there's the sense of...
What size feet did he have?
He had... Can I put it very simply? He was big enough for his boots.
OK.
Now, if only James, you could actually do that live.
Speak about the...
And also, remember, unlike Clive, I don't have all my jokes written down.
Come on, Starkey. If you could only decide whether you're talking in the present tense or the past tense, you would make more sense as a historian.
What is it with you, David, that you're always spoiling for a fight?
No, I'm not.
I'm trying to wind him up.
No, I'm not, actually.
You had a fight at Wellington School about a couple of weeks ago with some young writer for the New Statesman. You ended up having a huge sort of battle with her. What was that about?
Well, do you know, I really am ashamed to admit this. She started it. And she wrote possibly the most silly and childish piece that has ever been published in a national newspaper. In which, and there's much competition. I gather occasionally, James, you write things too. And the whole theme of it was a comparison between me and a dinosaur.
Yes.
And it was the bigger task.
Well, it's a little bit obvious, but you can't say that it's,
well, indeed, the trouble was she was so stupid that she even got the suffix wrong. She called me a bigotaurus. That means I'm a kind of bull. Now, I've been thinking about Taurus, whatever, and I had actually previously been wittily parodied as a dinosaur, which was a long time ago when I was doing The Moral Maze, and I received a wonderful cartoon from a rather frank fan, which was entitled Tyrannothesaurus Starkey. Now, that's really clever, because a thesaurus is treasury of words.
Yeah, but you don't lose your temper because somebody's insult is mildly not as elegant as the one you'd had 20 years before. That's
No, but I just tried to illustrate why she was really rather second-rate at the job.
You're obviously, well provided for because you get you're a good retainer at Channel 4, so I suppose...
I have no retainer at Channel 4.
Well, you had a big contract at Channel 4.
I had once upon a time.
No, it's all right.
As Jenny discovered, contracts come to ends.
Oh, dear.
Can we just leave it, please?
I did want to just ask you about...
I didn't actually use a felt tip at all at Channel 4.
But your fallings out have gone back over the years. You fell out with Geoffrey Elton, your sort of professor, but you described him as tetchy and arrogant. Did you learn a lot from him?
Like your pet, But actually, Clive, you've raised a really important thing. I think these quarrels, and you, Jenny, were talking about mother-daughter relations. I think these quarrels are vital. What happened, and with me, it goes back long, long before Geoffrey Elton. People think they've invented you. My mother thought she'd invented me. Geoffrey Elton thought she'd invented me. Some of my television producers, indeed, the producer of The Moral Maze, thought he'd invented me. And with all of them, you've got to break. I call it the Pygmalion complex. If you're going to become your own person, you have to break, and the breach is normally painful.
Is it true, David, that you coined the collective word for historians?
A malice of historians. No, actually, James, it's not. It was coined by my dear friend, now alas late friend, Kevin Sharp. And I think it gets it perfectly. A malice of historians. You've got a pride of lions, you've got an arrogance of Radio 4 presenters, and all the rest. Maybe it should and if they're Scottish, it's a verbosity.
All right. OK, we have to end there with a representative of the malice, or... even though I don't even
David Starkey.
a bore of historians. Anyway, The Two Churchills begins on Sunday, the 22nd of July at 8 p.m. on Channel 4. That's all the loose ends tied up. My thanks to all my guests: Dr. David Starkey, Jenny Eclair, Jim Naughtie, Barbara Marl, and Natalie Duncan, Arthur Smith, and Simon Armitage. Next week, my guests will include Helena Kennedy QC and Neil Sedaka. Until then, from me for now, goodbye.
Loose Ends was presented by Clive Anderson and produced by Cathie Mahoney.